Hi, everybody. Welcome. Tonight's Friday night, and I will be back on Monday. And I can't remember what is it? That's going to be the 16th or something. So I'll be back on Monday at 11 o'clock. Tonight, I'm going to be reading from the third book, the same one that I read from last night. And so we're talking about Trevor and Ruth's relationship. And something terrible happened to Trevor as he was going out of town, sort of having this sort of crisis about his life being so temporary, just going from job to job. You know, even though he's got this PhD and he doesn't really have this home. You know, and he's in love with Ruth, who's from Walkerville, and she's, you know, has her own business. She's got her own house. I mean, it's like, you know, just there's so much difference in their lifestyles. Lorraine was preparing dinner. Trevor hoped it was her tuna casserole. He stopped himself. Tuna casserole? Hesitating at the living room door, Lorraine observed the 1,000-watt smile emanating from her son. She called to him, her hand at her throat, wondering what he was seeing, what he was remembering. He turned to her so his body faced her, both crutches for once working in unison. There were 2 women with her. He studied one of them intently. She had red hair and was tall, and she smiled expectantly. Her blue eyes held pools of tears. He shook his head, asking himself, why did she look so familiar? Lorraine paused, trying to gauge his mood, his welfare. Trevor, these women are from Walkerville. They know you. Not listening to her and ignoring the women, he stated loudly, nervously, I remember your tuna fish casseroles and how much I love them. That's a memory, isn't it? His tone was pleading, willing her to confirm he loved her tuna casseroles. The woman with red hair started crying. The woman next to her, who reminded him of someone, patted her arm. His mother's usually sad face was transported with joy. Yes, yes, you loved my casserole. That was the only thing you'd eat sometimes. Pulling away from her, he looked at the woman still lingering in the doorway. The one with the red hair looked so familiar. Martha Janine, he shouted proudly. He remembered. He smiled, visibly drawing himself up taller. His joy was apparent. He remembered Martha Janine. He remembered his mother's casserole. Both visitors were too well bred to reveal any horror as they watched him lumber towards them, one leg shorter than the other. Martha Janine wept. This was not the person who had consulted for her about the farm. That young man was vibrant, smiling, curious. This person was almost a shell. He had lost so much weight. There were reddish scars on his face, and most of all his legs. He was having difficulty managing those crutches. The blonde woman's hand flew to her heart. Trevor, oh Trevor, what happened? He heard her voice and 1,000 memories swirled around him. Dizzy, he stopped directly in front of her, a study in complete incomprehension. Ruth, he gasped as if he were waking up from an endless recycled dream. Where's Ruth? The 4 of them gathered in the kitchen, where Lorraine made a pot of coffee. It was just like the doctors kept saying, that it would just happen one day. You'd start remembering. They felt the memory loss was only temporary. Leslie asked respectfully, and your leg, Trevor, will you always use a crutch? He reddened, looking up at Lorraine, who pulled her sweater closer around her thin neck, as if she were freezing in the hot kitchen. Softly she replied for him, your left leg was crushed from your ankle to your knee. Your knee was replaced and you've had 6 surgeries on your leg. You'll always have one leg shorter than the other, and you'll probably always use at least one crutch. The mood in the kitchen was muted. Outside, neighborhood kids were being called in for dinner. Inside, the oven made cooling down noises, and the scents in the kitchen were mouth-watering. Everyone around the small table was stunned, especially the 2 visitors. They were still processing what they were seeing and hearing. Hopeless and despairing, Trevor got up awkwardly. He was still learning to maneuver those crutches. The 3 women watched him. Sighing, he balanced against the chair, preparing to leave the kitchen. Tell Ruth to forget about me, Leslie. He started to hobble towards the door, and Leslie raised an angry voice. Stop this very moment, Trevor Collins. Lorraine and Martha Janine were startled by Leslie's tone, and Trevor turned grimly around to face Ruth's mother. He could see Ruth in her face, the shape of her mouth, the furrowed forehead. He felt his heart breaking. Shamefaced, he offered dully. Ruth's so full of life. She moves, she dances, she runs. She's not going to be with somebody who can barely walk across the room. Leslie walked to him. She was quivering with rage. Standing in front of him, she demanded by sheer force of will that he look at her. You may not decide for my daughter what she wants or doesn't want. I have never seen Ruth suffer so much as in the last few months. She has been going slowly insane, trying to understand why you just left her with no explanation. No, this is not a decision that you may make for Ruth. Do you understand? So, the second piece that I'm going to read is Trevor makes it back to Walkerville. And he tracks Ruth down, and they go to her house. And if you take a look at the cover, Ruth lives in this water tower that she's converted into a house. And if you guys look around, you'll know where it's located. So this is the second part. Curiously, Ruth opened her front door and gasped at the sight before her. They were all here, her parents, Martha, Janine, and Desmond, Fiona and Francis, Josie and Al. Josie lumbered up as fast as she could in her 8th month of pregnancy. She left Al to carry a large bag of food. Wrapping her arms around Ruth, she whispered, I had to tell them, I really did, I'm sorry. Dismissing her friend, Ruth only nodded. Okay, I know. Rapidly, the kitchen was filled with family and friends. She tried to greet everyone. Most everyone, except her mother and Martha Janine, watched in shock as Trevor slowly and awkwardly came down the staircase. Both Francis and Patrick started toward Trevor to help him. An unspoken signal was passed to everyone, and they held their collective breath as he made his way haltingly down the last step. He stood there, looking at each one, sweat collected on his upper lip, his red hair still damp, curls for once under control, his impish green eyes shy with all the attention. Standing as he was, leaning forward with both crutches strapped to his wrist, he looked vulnerable. It was apparent that his left leg was a full 2 inches shorter than his right. It was also apparent that he'd lost weight. There were a few scars on the left side of his face, a thin white-heeled line above his forehead, and a longer gash at his cheek. Hi, everyone, he said jovially. Holding up his crutches, wobbling for a second before putting them back down, he continued, I guess you're all wondering where I've been and what I've been doing. Protectively, Ruth walked to Trevor's side, facing the friendly crowd with him. She put her arm around his waist, and he did the same, crutch and all. The sight could have been painful. Instead, it was important to see the feelings they both had for each other without physical contact. Fiona felt her eyes well up and could feel Frances's arms slip around her, squeezing her to him. Josie was in Al's arms, crying. Only Martha, Janine, and Leslie were dry-eyed and smiling. Trevor exhaled a sigh, clearing his throat. I'm willing to answer any questions, tell you anything. Just know that Ruth and I haven't had a chance to talk. So whatever I say or whatever you ask will probably be news to her as well. He closed his eyes for a second, then kissed Ruth quickly. Balancing carefully, he asked, Hey, can we get a drink and sit down? I'm having a hell of a time balancing on these things. I'm still getting used to them. That's it for the night. Thanks for joining me. And don't forget to look down at the bottom of the YouTube page here. And if you like us, do a thumbs up. And also you'll find out information about how to get in touch with us about questions and feedback. I'd really love to hear from you. And I promise to answer or, get in touch. We're AC, my factotum over here, is archiving all of these live readings, and there's a link for the playlist as well below. And so he'll be, like I said, I'll be back at 11 on Monday night, and AC will put a link up on Monday sometime. So again, thanks for joining us, and read the book. Good night.